At 55, I was the kind of man people called reliable. I answered every email within 5 minutes. Didn't matter if it was midnight. Didn't matter if I was on vacation. CEOs, board members, government officials, they all knew I'd respond. My inbox was my kingdom, my power, and I controlled it like a machine. Except for one email. One email that sat unread in a folder marked family for 8 years. It was from my daughter. Subject line: Dad, please read. She was 13 when she wrote it. I was in Tokyo negotiating a merger. I remember the press called it a masterstroke. What no one knew was that at the exact moment I was shaking hands with billionaires, my daughter was alone in her room, writing me a letter I'd never read. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't even angry. It was a quiet, terrified plea. She said the house didn't feel like home anymore. That Mom cried when she thought no one saw. That she felt invisible. She ended with a sentence I've never forgotten since the day I finally opened that message. Maybe you're too busy being everyone's dad except mine. That line broke me. 8 years later, sitting in my corner office with awards lining the wall, that one sentence hit harder than any deal I'd ever closed. Because in that moment, I realized I hadn't lost a client. I had lost my daughter. And what I did next wasn't about success anymore. It was about redemption. My name is Michael Trent, and I'm 55 years old. I grew up in a rusted-out corner of Ohio, the kind of town where dreams went to die quietly. My father worked 3 jobs: mechanic by day, janitor by night, and handyman on weekends. He was the hardest working man I ever knew, but he never got ahead. I remember watching him at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled up, staring at bills he couldn't pay. He had a chance once, an offer to move to Chicago for a better job, but he turned it down, said the family couldn't handle the upheaval, said we needed stability. What we got instead was poverty. Stability meant my mother cried in secret, and my brother dropped out of school to work at a gas station. I swore I'd never live like that. More than that, I swore my family would never live like that. I'd be the provider my father couldn't afford to be. I'd chase every opportunity he'd walked away from. That was the promise I made to myself when I was 16, kneeling on the greasy floor of his workshop, scraping oil stains off concrete. I was the first in my family to go to college. I studied computer science with a minor in economics, not because I loved either, but because I saw where the world was heading. Tech was rising, and I wanted in. After graduation, I moved to Boston with 2 suitcases and a dream big enough to crush me if it failed. I started as a junior systems analyst at a mid-sized software firm. I didn't have connections. I didn't have polish. What I had was work ethic and hunger. I came in before the sun and left after it set. I volunteered for every brutal deadline, every impossible project. People called me obsessive. I called it investing in the future. It was during one of those late-night coding marathons that I met Hannah. She was in marketing, smart and sharp-tongued, and she hated how I ate lunch at my desk. "If you die at that keyboard," she said once, "do you want your tombstone to read, 'He crushed Q3'?" I laughed and told her no one else asked me things like that. We married 2 years later. When our daughter Emily was born, something shifted in me. I remember holding her in the hospital, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and thinking, this is it. This is what I was working for. Not the stock options, not the corner office, her, us. At first I tried to balance it. I'd come home for dinner, sometimes. I changed diapers. I read bedtime stories. Well, I tried. I'd fall asleep mid-sentence, and Hannah would finish the story with a smirk. Money was still tight then. Our apartment was small. We argued over medical bills and formula brands. But we were happy. I thought we were. Then the offer came. I was 34. A major tech firm in Seattle, Synercore, was expanding, and they needed someone to head up a new product line. It was a once-in-a-lifetime leap. Double the salary, executive title, equity, stability. I told Hannah it was for us, for Emily. She hesitated, but I was persuasive. It's just a few years, I promised. I'll build something solid. Then we'll slow down. I'll be home more. We moved to Seattle. I didn't slow down. Synercore was a pressure cooker, but I thrived. My reputation grew. I became the guy who delivered. Bonuses piled up. Promotions followed. I gave speeches at conferences, led panels, got featured in trade magazines. I shook hands with billionaires. I hired and fired people who were older than me. And at home, the distance started growing. But at the time, I didn't see it. All I saw was what I was achieving, what I was securing for my family. We upgraded houses. We went on vacations, though I joined late or left early. I justified every absence. Every missed birthday or recital or parent-teacher conference was chalked up as a trade-off. I'm doing this for them, I told myself. They'll understand when they're older. I believed that. I needed to believe that. Because if I didn't, I'd have to admit I was becoming the very thing I once swore I'd never be. A man who let work define him, no matter what it cost. The first crack appeared on Emily's first birthday. I was in New York, pitching a deal to a European investor group. It was the culmination of 6 months' work, and my boss had flown in just to watch me present. I told Hannah I'd be back in time for the party. I even ordered a custom cake with Emily's name on it, but the meeting ran long. Then the client wanted dinner. Then the flight was delayed. By the time I landed back in Seattle, it was past midnight. The house was dark. The leftover cake sat in the fridge like a quiet accusation. I kissed Emily's forehead while she slept and whispered, "We'll celebrate this weekend. Just the three of us." That weekend never happened. Something else always came up. Another meeting, another deadline, another opportunity too good to miss. It became a pattern. I'd promised to make it up. Next weekend. Next month. After this project. After the next promotion. I was always just on the verge of being present. Hannah never yelled. That almost made it worse. She'd just grow quieter. She adjusted her work schedule, went part-time so she could be there for Emily. She stopped telling me when Emily had a fever or when the dishwasher broke. I found out about things secondhand, or not at all. "Don't worry," she'd say when I noticed. "You're busy. I've got it." At first, I believed her. Then I started to lean on it. Emily grew quickly, too quickly. One day she was crawling, the next she was asking why Daddy missed pancakes on Sunday again. I used to think I'd be her hero, the dad who could solve any problem, fix any situation. But I became the man who brought gifts instead of time. I remember coming home late one evening, dropping my briefcase and finding a crayon drawing taped to the fridge. It was a picture of our family. 3 stick figures. One had long hair, Hannah. One had a little bow, Emily. The third one, me, had a briefcase for a head and a phone in one hand. In the corner, Emily had scribbled the word, "Busy Daddy." It was supposed to be funny. I laughed at the time, but something about it sat heavy in my chest for days. That was when she started writing letters. They were small things at first, folded notes left on my nightstand. Daddy, can you come to ballet on Saturday? Can we have pancakes this Sunday? Can we play puzzles? I kept them all. I just didn't answer them. Or I did, in my way. I'd reply with a new toy, or an email to Hannah saying, "Tell him I'm sorry, next week looks better." I thought I was doing my best. I thought she understood. But letters became longer, sadder. She started slipping them into my work bag. One day, while prepping for a board meeting, I found one in the front pocket. It read, "Dear Daddy, I miss you. You're always on the phone. When I see you, you're looking at your computer. Do you still like being my dad?" I read it. Then I put it back. Didn't have time to think about that. Not with quarterly numbers due. Eventually, she stopped leaving letters. She started sending emails. Hannah had helped her set up an account for school. Emily used it to write me the way a daughter shouldn't have to write her father. Formally, politely, with hope tucked in between lines of restrained disappointment. "Hi, Daddy. I hope you're doing well. I have a music recital next Friday. It starts at 6. I understand if you're busy, but I'd really like if you could come." I flagged the email to respond later. Later became never. The recital came and went. She didn't ask twice. One day, I came home to find Hannah sitting at the kitchen table with Emily asleep on her lap. She didn't look angry, just tired. "She stopped waiting tonight," she said quietly. "Waiting for what?" "For you to show up." I wanted to say something, but the words felt foreign in my mouth. Instead, I walked into my office, opened my laptop, and dove into another report. Numbers never judged. Spreadsheets didn't ask for bedtime stories. I told myself I was doing this for them. I never asked if they still believed that. By the time I turned 50, I had everything I once dreamed of. I'd risen from a junior analyst to the CEO of one of the most respected tech companies in the country. My name was printed on magazine covers. Analysts quoted me. Investors trusted me. My net worth crossed the 8-figure mark. I had a penthouse office with a skyline view. I had a boardroom that bore my name. I had assistants, advisors, and influence. I could call any shot I wanted, except the ones that mattered at home. At home, I had silence. Dinner had become a ritual of absence. I'd sit at the head of the table, but the conversation swirled around me like I wasn't there. Hannah would serve the food, ask Emily about school, laugh at something I didn't understand. Emily would respond in clipped tones, eyes fixed on her plate or her phone. If I tried to speak, the conversation would stall, then resume once I fell quiet. I had become a guest in my own family. I remember one night. Emily must have been 17 by then. We were all seated at the table. I was trying to share good news. Synercore had just secured a global partnership. The deal would generate hundreds of millions over the next 5 years. As I started describing the contract, Emily stood up. "I have homework," she said flatly, and walked away. She didn't even look at me. Hannah didn't say a word. I sat there, alone, fork hovering over untouched food, the weight of my success pressing down like a curse. Later that night, I went into my office, pulled out a drawer, and stared at the collection of notes and emails Emily had sent me over the years. Some were printed, some handwritten, all of them unread until now. They weren't angry. That's what struck me most. They were quiet, hopeful, heartbreaking attempts to connect. Each one a reminder of what I'd been too blind to see. I told myself I had done everything right. I had provided. I had secured her future. I had protected them from the life I came from. But the truth sat in those letters like a quiet indictment. I had built a future without them in it. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. Emily never introduced me to her friends. I saw photos online. She had become social, confident, but I wasn't in any of her stories. Hannah no longer looked at me the way she used to. Her eyes carried the weight of long nights, solo decisions, holidays spent making excuses for my absence. One morning, I came downstairs to find them laughing over breakfast. Pancakes, syrup, a shared inside joke I didn't understand. When I tried to join the moment, the laughter stopped. Not because they were angry, but because my presence was an interruption. They had learned to exist without me. I was successful, respected, wealthy, and utterly alone. Some nights I stayed at the office even when I didn't have to, not because the work demanded it, but because the silence at home was louder. I'd stare at the view from my office window, Seattle glittering beneath me, and wonder how a man could climb so high and still feel like he was falling. Colleagues envied me. Young professionals sought my mentorship. The world called me a leader. But behind closed doors, I couldn't lead a dinner conversation. Couldn't name Emily's favorite subject. Couldn't remember the last time Hannah touched my hand without pulling away. The emails I once responded to in under 5 minutes came at the cost of relationships I hadn't answered in years. I told myself this was temporary, that once I secured just one more deal, reached one more milestone, I'd return to them. But I had already become the thing I feared most. My father once chose family over opportunity and paid in poverty. I chose opportunity over family and paid in emptiness. That was the trap. Success doesn't shout its warnings. It whispers them quietly, through missed dinners, unread notes, and the look in your daughter's eyes when she stops expecting you to show up. At some point, without ever announcing it, Hannah stopped waiting for me. She didn't leave. She didn't threaten divorce. There were no dramatic confrontations or slammed doors. Just a gradual shift, a quiet reallocation of energy. Where she once leaned on me, she learned to stand entirely on her own. She became, in every practical sense, a single parent. She handled everything: doctor's appointments, school forms, parent-teacher meetings, late-night fevers, first heartbreaks. If something needed fixing, she either did it herself or hired someone. If Emily needed guidance, Hannah provided it. My presence was no longer required, nor requested. There was no resentment in her actions, at least not visibly. But there was a noticeable detachment. A calm efficiency that once belonged to us as a couple now belonged solely to her. She scheduled life without checking my calendar. She made decisions without looping me in. She no longer said we. It was always Emily and I. I remember overhearing her once on the phone with a friend. She laughed, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. "Yeah, it's easier this way," she said. "It's just simpler when you stop hoping." That word, simpler, stung more than any accusation ever could. Emily changed too. She had once been this bubbly, chatty child who ran to the door when I came home, even if I was late. But that version of her faded with time, like an old photograph left in the sun. By the time she hit 16, she had built an entire life I barely understood. She started attending weekend emotional intelligence workshops, things about boundaries, communication, self-worth. Hannah encouraged it. I dismissed it as fluff, but it clearly meant something to Emily. She applied for scholarships behind our backs, told Hannah after the fact. Me? I found out through a forwarded email. She won one, a competitive program at a liberal arts college on the other side of the country. Psychology major. Full ride. I should have been proud. I should have celebrated with her. But when Hannah told me over breakfast, the only thing I said was, "That far?" Hannah didn't look up from her coffee. She needs space. She needs to grow. She could do that here. She's already grown, Michael. You just haven't noticed. Emily left 6 months later. I carried her suitcase to the car. She said thank you. Not Dad. Just thank you. We hugged like acquaintances. Polite. Brief. At the airport, she gave Hannah a long embrace, whispered something that made Hannah tear up. Then she turned to me, gave a small wave, and walked away. No tears. No last glance, just gone. After that, the house was quiet, but not in the way I'd expected. Not sad or empty, just quiet, as if it had finally adjusted to my frequency. We still lived under one roof, Hannah and I, but it felt like we were roommates sharing a long lease neither of us wanted to break first. We coordinated chores, paid bills, hosted holidays out of obligation. We stopped celebrating anniversaries, stopped mentioning them at all. Weekends came and went. Sometimes we'd pass each other in the hallway and exchange a tired smile. Sometimes, not even that. Once, on a rainy Sunday, I found her reading on the couch, legs curled up under a blanket. I sat on the opposite chair, trying to think of something to say. After a long silence, I asked, "Do you ever think about when we used to walk to that coffee shop on First Avenue? The one with the terrible jazz music?" She looked at me, surprised, not by the memory, but that I still had it. "I used to love those walks," she said. "So did I." We didn't say anything else. The silence crept back in like an old friend. Every photo on the walls included Emily and Hannah. The three of us together were rare. The ones with all three smiling, even rarer. There were no arguments, no hostility, just distance. A sort of invisible glass that kept us from really touching each other's lives. We each lived on our own islands, waving occasionally, but never building bridges. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had once believed I was protecting my family by staying ahead, by pushing harder, achieving more. But in reality, they had learned to live without me, not because they wanted to, but because I had taught them how. There's a moment in every crumbling relationship when one person reaches out, one last time, before letting go. Hannah's came on a Tuesday night, just after dinner. Emily had already gone upstairs. We were sitting at the table in silence, the way we often did now. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that settles into your bones when you've carried too much for too long. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice calm but steady. "Maybe we should try counseling, marriage therapy." I didn't even look up from my laptop. "I'm swamped right now," I said. "Can we talk about this next week?" "It won't be less busy next week, Michael. It's just a bad quarter. Once this launch is done," she stood, slowly, pushed her chair back with deliberate quiet. "That's what you said last year," she replied. "And the year before that. You always think it's temporary, but this is the life we live now." I finally looked up, but she was already walking away. I never brought it up again. A few days later, Emily sent me an email. The subject line was different this time. No hopeful invitation, no soft, "maybe if you can make it," just, "final request." I opened it. I read it. I didn't answer. She wrote about a school event, a student-led seminar where she was one of the panelists. She didn't ask me to come. She told me it was happening. She said she understood if I was busy and that she wouldn't be surprised if I didn't show. Then she added one final line. I stopped expecting you, Dad. It hurts less that way. I closed the email. I had a meeting in 15 minutes. That night, instead of responding, I ordered her a brand new tablet, the best model, overnight shipping. It arrived the next day, wrapped and waiting on the kitchen counter when she came home. She looked at it, then looked at Hannah. He read it, didn't he? She asked. Hannah didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Emily took the box upstairs. She never said thank you. She never used it. I started doing that more often, buying things. A trip to Paris for her spring break. A designer bag she once mentioned in passing. A car for graduation, months early. It was easier to spend money than time. Easier to click buy now than to ask real questions, hear real answers, sit through the discomfort of real feelings. Guilt was expensive, but it never asked me to change. Hannah noticed. One night she met me at the door when I came home. She doesn't want gifts, Michael, she said. It's just a gesture. I thought it'd make her smile. She doesn't want a smile. She wants you. I sighed, loosened my tie. You know how hard I'm working. I'm doing all this for us. No, she said. You're doing all this for you. We're just the people you leave the lights on for. I didn't respond. There was no fight, no explosion. Just a deeper silence than usual. I started noticing patterns. Emily stopped forwarding her school achievements. I found out about her college essay from a neighbor. She had written about resilience, about growing up in a house with everything money could buy, except time. I didn't see the essay until it was published in a student anthology. She hadn't included my name, just my mother and the silence I grew up inside. Sometimes I'd get glimpses of what I'd lost. I'd walk past her room and hear her laughing on video calls, animated and alive in ways she never was around me. Or I'd come downstairs and see Hannah and Emily curled up on the couch, sharing popcorn, talking about a show I didn't know existed. I was living in the same house, breathing the same air, but I was a ghost. There were moments, brief openings, a text from Hannah. She's singing at the winter concert. 7 p.m. An invite from Emily's school, parents' breakfast, Friday. A Saturday morning when I woke up before my alarm and found both of them in the kitchen, dancing to an old Stevie Wonder song. But I never stepped in. Work was always there. A deadline, a call, a client, an excuse. Looking back now, those were the moments that could have saved us. They were windows, and I shut every one of them. The last time I saw Emily in our house, it was a Sunday evening. She had come home for the weekend, an unannounced visit, the kind I used to dream about. I walked in from the garage, briefcase in hand, expecting silence. Instead, I heard voices from the kitchen, hers and Hannah's. At first, I just stood in the hallway listening to the rhythm of them talking, laughing, cooking. There was music playing, some acoustic thing I didn't recognize. I didn't want to interrupt. Then I heard my name. I just don't want to be around him right now, Emily said. You don't have to be, Hannah replied gently. He's always trying to fix things with stuff. Trips, gadgets, money. He never fixes the thing that actually matters. Him. I walked in then, clearing my throat. They stopped talking. Emily gave me a nod. Not cold, not warm, just neutral. I tried to act casual. Smells good in here. We're making lemon pasta, Hannah said. Want some? Sure, I said. That'd be great. We sat at the table, Emily across from me, Hannah between us. We ate in silence for a while. Then I made a mistake. I was thinking, I began, maybe we could go somewhere next month, the three of us. That lake cabin we used to like? Emily didn't look up. I have finals. After that, then. She put her fork down. You don't get it, she said. It's not about trips. It's about trust. What do you mean? I mean I don't believe you when you say things anymore. You offer vacations like apologies. But I don't want apologies. I want honesty. I am being honest. No, you're being comfortable. You say what makes you feel better, not what we need to hear. I glanced at Hannah for support, but she was staring at her plate. Emily, I said, I know I haven't always been there, but I'm trying. She stood up. I'm going back to campus tonight. You just got here. I shouldn't have come. She left the table, went upstairs, and came down 15 minutes later with her bag. No hug. No goodbye. She walked past me like I was a stranger. The door closed behind her with the softness of finality. That night, Hannah and I didn't speak. The next morning, I came downstairs to find a manila envelope on the kitchen table. My name was written on it in Hannah's handwriting. Inside was a single document, petition for dissolution of marriage. No note, no dramatics, just the truth, printed in black ink. I sat down, the envelope still open in my hands. I looked around the kitchen, at the framed family photo from Disneyland, taken 10 years ago, at the chipped coffee mug Emily had made in pottery class, at the empty chair where Hannah usually sat, sipping her tea. It was all still there, but it was already gone. When Hannah came downstairs, I didn't speak. She didn't look at me. She poured her coffee, took a deep breath, and finally said, I can't do this anymore. I know I've been absent, I began. It's not just absence, she cut in. It's the fact that you didn't notice you were gone. I swallowed hard. We can fix this. No, she said. You can't fix what you never tried to protect. I opened my mouth, then closed it. She left the kitchen. The silence that followed was different than before. It wasn't the usual heaviness. It was hollow. Final. For the first time, I couldn't explain away the distance. Couldn't rationalize it with stress or deadlines. Couldn't throw money at it and expect change. It was over. And somehow, I still didn't fully understand why. I spent the next few days drifting. I still went to work, still answered emails, still stood in front of teams with a confident smile. But inside, I was numb. Every corner of the house reminded me of absence. Emily's empty bedroom, the guest bathroom no one used, the echo of laughter that no longer lived in our walls. One night, I wandered into Emily's room. Everything was neatly in place. Books, journals, an old scarf I'd bought her on a trip to London. The email tablet I'd given her still sat in the drawer, unopened. I scrolled through my inbox. Thousands of unread messages. One from Emily. The last one. No subject line. Just a single sentence. I'm done trying to be heard. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of everything I had missed. The morning of the IPO pitch was like every other high-stakes morning in my career. Polished, controlled, and scheduled to the second. I had reviewed the deck 4 times. The boardroom was set, screens ready, coffee brewed. Our partners from Zurich and Singapore were dialed in. My executive team sat along the sides, eager, quiet, tense. I had delivered hundreds of presentations in my life, but this one felt different. Bigger. Historic. At 9:01 a.m., I began. Slide 1. Market expansion strategy. Slide 2. Revenue trajectory. Slide 3. Projections. I clicked to advance to the next slide, but the screen glitched. Just a flicker, barely noticeable. I tapped the touchpad again. Nothing. Annoyed, I minimized the window. That's when it happened. My screen reverted to my desktop, and I saw a folder I hadn't noticed in years. It was buried beneath layers, personal, archived, family. I didn't remember creating it. A notification blinked beside it, one unread. I don't know why I clicked. Maybe my mind needed a second of escape. Maybe I wanted to delay facing the room of investors staring at me. Inside the folder was a single email. From Emily Trent, date, 8 years ago. Subject: Dad. Please read. I froze. 8 years. I double-clicked. It opened slowly, like my laptop knew this wasn't just another message. The body of the email was short. Hi, Daddy. I know you're busy. I don't want to make you feel bad. I feel like I'm disappearing, like I'm fading out of your world. I told Mom I had a stomachache today so I could stay home from school. I just didn't want to talk to anyone, not even her. I guess I just wanted to say, I miss you. I hope you still think about me sometimes. If you ever want to talk, I'm still here. For now. Love. Emily. Attached was a single JPEG file. I clicked it. The photo loaded slowly. It was a hospital room. Emily, much younger, maybe 13, lay in a bed with IVs in her arms. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. The caption beneath the image read, "They called Mom. She was at work. I called you too, but it went to voicemail. I just wanted to hear your voice." The room around me disappeared. I didn't hear the board members asking questions. Didn't hear my CFO whisper, "Michael, are you okay?" I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding, not in the adrenaline-fueled way it did before a deal, but in the way I imagined it might just stop altogether. 8 years ago. I was in Berlin that week delivering a keynote. I remembered the standing ovation, the after-party, the article that called me a visionary. My daughter had been in a hospital bed, alone. My phone had buzzed during that presentation. I'd turned it off. I stood in that boardroom, staring at the screen, and the world fell apart. I closed the laptop. I need 5 minutes, I said, or thought I said. My voice sounded foreign. I stepped out into the hallway, found a bench, and sat down. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. I don't remember who came after me first. My assistant, maybe, or the head of investor relations. Someone tried to talk. I didn't respond. Eventually, I stood up and walked to the elevator. The meeting was postponed. The pitch shelved. The IPO didn't matter anymore. I went home. Not to the office, not to the hotel suite the firm had reserved for me. Home. The house was empty. Hannah had moved out months ago. Emily was on the other side of the country. I sat in the living room, pulled up the email again, and read it 20 times. Each word cut deeper than the last. I feel like I'm disappearing. I hope you still think about me. If you ever want to talk, I'm still here. For now. For now. I hadn't just missed a recital or a birthday. I had missed a cry for help, and I had responded with silence. I flew out the next morning. No meetings, no suit, no briefcase. Just me, a carry-on, and a letter I printed before leaving. A copy of the email Emily had written 8 years ago, folded neatly and tucked inside my coat pocket like a confession. She was studying at a small liberal arts college in Vermont. I had her address from a tuition invoice Hannah had forwarded years ago. I'd never visited, never asked to. The campus was quiet when I arrived, blanketed in late autumn. Students walked in pairs, scarves pulled up, coffee cups in hand. I didn't know where to begin, so I went to the admin building and asked for her dorm. They wouldn't give it to me. Privacy laws. Of course. I waited outside the student union instead, watching the doors like a man hoping for a miracle. After an hour, I saw her. Emily, hair tied back, glasses. She looked older, more composed, more distant. She was walking with a friend, laughing. I stood up. Emily. She stopped, startled. Her smile vanished. Her friend looked between us and walked away. She didn't speak. I read your email, I said, voice breaking. The one from 8 years ago. Nothing. I didn't see it. Not until yesterday. I should have. She turned and started walking. I followed. Please, I said. Just give me a minute. That photo, Jesus, Emily, I didn't know. She stopped and turned sharply. You didn't know because you didn't want to, she said, because you never looked. That was the year Mom almost left you. I begged her to. I begged her to take me away from that silence. I didn't mean to disappear, but you did. She reached into her bag and pulled something out. A folded piece of paper, creased and worn. She held it up. Do you remember this? I squinted. My handwriting. A letter. Then I remembered. I'd written it when she was 10, before a business trip I couldn't cancel. I'd told her I was proud of her, that I loved her, that we'd have a special day when I got back. We never had that day. She handed me the letter. I reached out, but she dropped it at my feet. Keep it, she said. You're good at keeping things you never follow through on. Before I could respond, she walked away. This time I didn't follow. That night I drove to Hannah's place, a modest townhouse on a quiet street. I hadn't been there since she moved out. She opened the door and stared at me for a long moment. No surprise, no welcome, just resignation. I read the email, I said. The one from Emily, the photo. She nodded slowly. I didn't know. You didn't want to. That's what she said. Because it's true. We stood there in the doorway, two people with a shared history and no present. I want to fix this, I said. Her expression didn't change. You always want to fix things after they're broken, after we've swept up the glass and bled from the cuts. I'm not asking you to forget. Just let me try. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed. We buried you, Michael, 8 years ago. You didn't die, but we had to grieve you just the same, because grieving was easier than hoping. I said nothing. She sighed. We survived you, Emily and I. We built a life, not perfect, but functional, quiet, safe. Don't come knocking now like that wasn't real. I don't know how to undo it. You can't. Tears welled in my eyes, uninvited. I miss you both. She shook her head. No. You miss the idea of us. But the real us? You let go of that a long time ago. The wind picked up, cold and sharp. Please, I whispered, just don't close the door. She stepped back inside and left it half open. I'm not closing it, she said, but I'm not waiting by it either. Then she walked away into the house. I stood on the porch, staring at the crack of light between the frame and the wood. I didn't step inside. Not yet. I went home. Not because I wanted to. Not because I thought I had earned the right to call it that anymore, but because I didn't know where else to go. The house was colder than I remembered, or maybe it was just empty. The furniture still sat where Hannah had left it. The walls still held family portraits, frozen smiles from years that now felt like someone else's life. I walked upstairs to my office. It was the only room that had truly belonged to me, my fortress, my sanctuary, the place where I had buried myself in work, in purpose, in distraction. I closed the door behind me and stood in the middle of the room. On the left wall, framed awards lined the panels: Executive of the Year, Visionary Leadership, Forbes 100. A glass case held stock certificates, plaques, even a personalized gold pen from the board after my 5th year as CEO. On the shelves, binders of strategies, pitch decks, expansion reports, neatly labeled, perfectly organized. And on the desk, my laptop sat waiting, still open to the email Emily had written me 8 years ago. I sank into the chair and let the silence press down. This room had once made me feel powerful, in control. Now it felt like a mausoleum. I thought about all the nights I had sat there with the door closed, while Emily played alone in her room, while Hannah reheated dinners I never came down to eat, while birthdays and anniversaries slipped past like footnotes I'd never read. I had built my life on deliverables and deadlines, KPIs and quarterly goals. I had met every target, except the only one that mattered. The weight hit me all at once. I broke. No tears at first, just a slow collapse, like scaffolding giving way. My head dropped into my hands, my chest tightened. A sound escaped my throat, raw and unfamiliar. Then the sobs came, sharp, deep, full-body shudders. I wept for everything I had lost. For the little girl who used to wait at the window. For the woman who used to hold my hand in parking lots. For the man I had promised never to become, and yet had. I wept because I couldn't remember the last time I made Emily laugh. Because I had no idea what her favorite song was now. Because I had missed every version of her that ever needed me. The plaques on the wall blurred through the tears. They looked like tombstones. I sat there for what felt like hours. Then I wiped my face, turned toward the laptop, and opened a new message. To Emily Trent at. Subject: I'm sorry I stared at the blank screen. What do you say to someone you've failed for most of their life? I started typing. Emily, there's nothing I can write that undoes what I've missed. Nothing I can say that makes up for the nights you needed me and I wasn't there. The hospital, the concerts, the letters, the emails, the questions you asked in silence. I missed them all. I told myself I was doing it for you, for Mom, for our future. But the truth is, I was doing it for me. And I lost you in the process. I'm sorry. Tell me how to fix this. I'll start by shutting everything else down. No more presentations, no more pretending, no more excuses. Just me, here, asking for one more chance to show up. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to work for it anyway. Love, Dad. I hit send. I sat back staring at the screen, as if waiting for a reply that I knew might never come. But for the first time in years, I had said what needed to be said. Not as a CEO, not as a provider, not as a man who could buy his way out of guilt, but as a father. I resigned on a Thursday. The boardroom was full. Investors, executives, press, all expecting the quarterly update, all waiting to hear about expansion plans in Asia, the next product rollout, and the IPO that had been delayed a week. Instead, I stood at the head of the table, holding a single sheet of paper. I won't be leading Synercore moving forward, I said. A silence fell over the room like a curtain. I'm stepping down, effective immediately. Confusion turned to disbelief, then chaos. Is this a joke? Someone asked. You're leaving now? In the middle of the IPO cycle? This is your company, Mark. That was the first time I'd heard my own name that morning. I'd rehearsed this a dozen times, in front of a mirror, on walks through the city, in the shower. I'd pictured myself delivering it with calm dignity, but standing there, I realized there was no graceful way to let go of a life you'd built from scratch. So I spoke plainly. I've spent 3 decades building this company. I've made money, headlines, partnerships, but somewhere along the way, I stopped building anything that actually matters. I looked out at the faces in front of me, most of them stunned, a few visibly angry. My daughter wrote me an email 8 years ago, I continued. I didn't read it until last week. She was in the hospital, scared, alone. I was in Berlin, giving a keynote on innovation. I missed the most important moment of her life, and I didn't even know it happened. Someone shifted in their seat. Another stared down at his phone, as if willing himself out of the moment. I thought I could fix everything with success. But some things don't need fixing. They need presence. I placed the letter on the table. I'm going home. Then I walked out. No applause. No send-off. Just the sound of my own footsteps echoing down the hall. 2 days later, I was standing on the porch of my mother's house in Ohio. It was the home I grew up in. Peeling paint, a cracked walkway, the faint scent of lilacs from the garden she once tended so carefully. She had passed 3 years ago, the house left untouched. I let myself in with the spare key under the 3rd step, just like always. The air smelled like dust and old books. I ran my hand along the banister, pausing at the kitchen doorway, where she used to stand with a towel over her shoulder, humming Motown tunes while cooking beans and cornbread. I dropped my bags and didn't move for a full hour. That night, I slept in my childhood bed, knees curled, hands on my chest, as if bracing for something. The next morning, I stepped outside with a rake. The garden was overgrown, dandelions like tiny suns scattered across dry earth, the vegetable patch buried under weeds. I pulled on a pair of old gloves and got to work. For the first time in years, my hands hurt for something real. Each day I cleared more, a few feet at a time. I found the outline of the rose bushes she had once pruned every Sunday. I unearthed her old gardening tools from the shed, handles worn smooth from decades of care. I didn't replace them. I used what she used. Inside, I scrubbed the walls, fixed cabinet doors, sanded the floorboards. I kept the old ceramic mug she used for tea. Her notepad with grocery lists still hung on the fridge. The last item faded but legible. Apples, eggs. Remind Mark to call Emily. I left it there. One afternoon, I walked into the spare room, what she used to call Mark's museum. She had saved everything, every award, every article, every certificate, framed, laminated, preserved. I stood in front of the wall for a long time. Then I gathered it all. Plaques, stock certificates, the framed letter from the White House congratulating me on a Tech Innovation Award. I carried them outside, stacked them in the fire pit. It wasn't anger. It wasn't regret. It was release. The fire caught quickly. The flames licked the gold trim, curled the edges of heavy cardstock. Smoke rose into the gray sky as memories turned to ash. I watched until the last piece fell. No one clapped. No one wrote about it. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I had accomplished something that mattered. I began writing to Emily every Sunday. It became a ritual. I'd sit at the kitchen table in my mother's house, old wood creaking beneath my elbows, and type a letter. Not formal, not polished. Just honest. Sometimes I told her about the garden, how the roses had begun to bloom again. Sometimes I shared memories, the first time I held her, the sound of her laugh when she was 4 and spilled juice all over my laptop. Sometimes I just wrote what I couldn't say out loud. I don't expect anything, one message read. I just want you to know I'm here. No meetings, no flight delays, just here. She never responded, but the emails didn't bounce. That was something. I texted Hannah asking if it was okay to keep sending them. She replied with a single sentence. She reads them, but don't expect more than that. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number, Vermont area code. My heart leapt. It wasn't Emily. It was Hannah. I need to say this clearly, she said. So listen. I sat down. Don't reach for us out of guilt. Don't come back because it's quiet and you're lonely. If you're not sure, if you're not ready to stay the course, then don't you dare knock on that door again. I'm not the same man anymore, I said quietly. That doesn't matter. What matters is if you're willing to be consistent, without applause, without guarantees. You broke trust, Mark. You don't get to demand forgiveness on your timeline. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. I'm not asking to be let back in, I said. I'm asking for the chance to earn it. There was silence. Then keep showing up quietly. The next day, I drove into town and volunteered at the local food bank. No press, no board seats, no name tags. Just me stacking boxes. I added that to my next email to Emily. Today I learned how many different ways people say thank you without using words. Still no reply. But I kept writing. Meanwhile, word of my resignation spread. It wasn't publicized the way my promotions had been. But in the tech world, news like that never stayed quiet for long. Former colleagues called, some out of curiosity, some with veiled judgment. You walked away from 9 figures, one said. What? Midlife crisis hit that hard? Another texted, tried trading in your RSUs for hugs yet? At a charity gala I was invited to speak at, an old friend from the board clapped me on the back. Look who found his soul, he said, laughing. Just in time to miss the biggest payout in company history. I smiled thinly. I already got my payout. I just didn't know what it cost. He blinked, then looked away. People were polite, but skeptical. I had been too successful for too long, too public, too distant. The idea that I had changed didn't fit their narrative. Redemption didn't trend on LinkedIn. At home, the garden grew stronger, the walls grew quieter, and every Sunday, the cursor blinked on a blank email until I filled it with something real. Then, one evening, I got a message from Hannah. 3 words. She saved them. I stared at the screen. She saved what? I replied. Your emails. A beat. In a folder. All of them. Even the first one. I didn't cry, I just sat there, heart full and still. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. That night, I wrote again. Dear M. Mom said you saved the emails. I don't know what that means, but I hope it means you believe I mean it when I say I'm not going anywhere. Even if you never respond, I'll keep writing, because I should have never stopped in the first place. Love, Dad. 6 months, 24 emails, 0 replies. Until one morning I opened my inbox and saw a new message from her. Subject line, lunch? That was all it said. No date, no time, no location. Just one word, a single fragile bridge extended across a chasm I had carved. I stared at it for nearly an hour. Then I replied, any day, any time. Your call. 2 days later, she sent the place. An old cafe on her campus, quiet and tucked behind a bookstore. I remembered passing it once, years ago, when Hannah and I had dropped her off freshman year. Back when I still thought my presence could be replaced by tuition payments and text messages. The day of, I arrived 15 minutes early. I sat at a corner table, hands folded on my lap, resisting the urge to check my phone. I hadn't worn a watch in months, another symbol I had let go. Time had become something I lived through now, not measured. At exactly 12 o'clock, she walked in. Emily, older, wiser, not the child I remembered, but a woman in her own right. She sat across from me. No hug, no handshake. Just a quiet presence that filled the space like a slow tide. We said nothing for the first 15 minutes. She scanned the menu. I watched her, trying not to let my eyes linger too long, trying not to ruin the silence with apology. Finally, she looked up. Do you remember what I wrote in that email? She asked. I swallowed hard. Every word. She tilted her head. What did I say? You said you felt like you were fading out of my world, that you didn't want to talk to anyone, not even Mom. And you hoped I still thought about you sometimes. And you signed it for now. She looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin slowly. I meant it, she said. Every word. I know, I replied. And I deserved every one of them. The waitress arrived, took our order. We chose the same thing without realizing it. Grilled cheese with tomato soup. She smiled faintly when she noticed. We talked about safe things first. Her classes, her part-time job at the bookstore, a paper she was writing on resilience. Then she asked, why now? It wasn't accusatory, just curious. Because I stopped lying to myself, I said. I thought providing was enough. I thought being successful gave me permission to disappear. I was wrong. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, what changed? I read the email. She nodded slowly. And? It broke me. I said. Not just because of what you wrote, but because it took me 8 years to read it. She looked at me for a long time. You know what hurt the most? She asked. It wasn't that you weren't there for the big stuff. It was that you didn't even notice you weren't there. I felt that like a blade. I notice now, I said. Too late for some things, I know, but not for everything. She stirred her soup. I didn't expect this to happen, she said. Lunch, I mean. I was tired of being angry. You have every right to be. I know, but I also want to know who you are now. Not the man in the office, not the ghost in the kitchen. Just you. I'm still figuring that out, I admitted. She looked up, met my eyes. Good. Then maybe we can figure it out together. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. We finished lunch, walked slowly outside. She had class, so we kept it brief. No promises, no declarations. Just a gentle nod as she walked away. Before turning the corner, she paused. Same time next week? She asked. I smiled. I'll be here. That night, I sat at my mother's kitchen table again and opened my laptop. Dear Emily, today was one of the best days of my life. Not because it erased the past, but because it gave me something I thought I'd lost. A reason to believe in the future. Thank you for lunch, and for the question. I do remember every word. Love, Dad. The invitation came in an envelope, handwritten, sealed with a sticker that read Vermont College of Arts, Class of 2025. Inside was a single card. Dear Mark Trent, we are pleased to invite you as a guest speaker at our senior graduation celebration. This year's theme is Resilience and Renewal. Your daughter, Emily Trent, nominated you anonymously. Please prepare a 5-minute message. Your identity will be revealed during the speech. Sincerely, the commencement team. I read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Emily had chosen me. Not the CEO, not the keynote speaker. Me. I arrived early that day, suit neatly pressed, heart thudding in my chest like it hadn't in years. I sat in the green room behind the small stage, listening to the music and murmurs outside. When they introduced me, it was just a special guest, speaking today not as a public figure, but as a father who learned the meaning of resilience the hard way. I stepped onto the stage to polite, curious applause. The students didn't know who I was, but in the front row, I saw her, Emily, cap tilted slightly, eyes steady, and beside her, Hannah. I took a breath. I spent most of my life chasing the wrong kind of success, I began. I thought titles, deals, and accolades made me a good man. It took losing nearly everything to realize what truly matters. Showing up. Not when it's convenient, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. With presence. I paused. There's someone in this audience who once wrote me an email that changed my life. I didn't read it until 8 years later, but it broke me open. And from that break came something new, a version of me that no longer runs from silence. I looked directly at Emily. This is for her. The auditorium was quiet, not out of awkwardness, but something deeper, understanding, compassion. When I stepped down, Emily stood. She didn't hug me right away. Instead, she whispered, "I'm glad you came." Then, a second later, "You did good, Dad." That word, Dad, landed like a gift. After the ceremony, we walked to a nearby park. Hannah had packed sandwiches. Emily brought sparkling water and fresh peaches. It was the first picnic we'd had in over a decade. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. Every bite, every smile, every quiet shared glance said more than apologies ever could. That weekend, they invited me to dinner at Hannah's new house. Nothing fancy. Just pasta, garlic bread, and a bottle of wine. Emily set the table. I lit the candles. We laughed. About bad college cafeteria food. About Hannah's failed attempts at sourdough. Even about me learning how to fix the leaky garden hose back in Ohio. At one point, Hannah looked across the table. "You know," she said softly, "there's a townhouse 3 blocks from here. It's nothing like your old place, but it's got a porch and a backyard." Emily added, "And it's close enough to stop by for coffee." I didn't hesitate. 2 weeks later, I moved in. It wasn't the life I'd built before, but it was the life I had finally earned. A smaller house, a quieter rhythm, a closer seat at the table. For the first time in nearly 10 years, I wasn't a visitor in their lives. I was home. I called it Inbox Redemption. It started as a personal blog, just a place to document what I'd been through, not for sympathy, but for clarity. I didn't expect anyone to read it. The first post was raw, unedited. I wrote about the unread email from Emily, the hospital photo, the silence that followed. I hit publish and walked away. By morning, it had been shared over 100 times. By the end of the week, thousands. Messages flooded in, CEOs, single parents, burned-out executives, estranged kids, people who had spent years chasing numbers, only to wake up surrounded by trophies and echoes. One email stood out. "I read your story and called my daughter for the first time in 6 years. We're having lunch tomorrow. Thank you." That was when I realized, redemption isn't just a journey inward. It's a path others can walk with you. So I kept writing. Weekly posts, lessons learned, failures owned, small victories celebrated, like helping Emily move into her first apartment, or learning how to make French toast without burning it. Eventually, the blog caught the attention of a leadership retreat for tech executives. They asked me to speak. I said no the first 2 times. Then I thought of the man I used to be, the one who measured love by achievement and thought silence could be outsourced. So I said yes. The room was full of sharp minds and sharper egos, people who would have once looked up to me as a titan of industry. I stood in front of them and told the truth. I was the fastest email responder in my company. 5 minutes max. Everyone praised it. They called me committed, efficient, focused. Pause. But I ignored one email for 8 years, and it nearly cost me everything. I let the silence settle. I'm here to tell you that being indispensable at work means nothing if you become invisible at home. A hand went up. "What changed you?" "My daughter," I said. "Her silence, her pain, her strength to speak again." After that, invitations came often, to mentor, to teach, to guide. I accepted a few, not all. I was careful not to lose myself in fixing others before fully rebuilding myself. Still, I sat with young CEOs, usually in quiet cafes or their corner offices, and listened. Most of them didn't need advice. They needed permission to slow down, to go home earlier, to answer the emails that didn't come with profit margins. One of them, barely 30, once asked me, "What's the one rule you live by now?" I smiled. Email fast if you must, I said. But don't expect fast emails to save a family dying slowly. He nodded, then wrote it down. Years passed. Emily graduated again, master's in counseling. Hannah taught weekend art classes. And me? I planted tomatoes in the backyard, walked the dog we adopted together, and still wrote every Sunday. Not to Emily. She was in the room with me now, but to everyone who needed to hear the words I once couldn't say. My final blog post was titled, "The Last Unread Email." I wrote, "For years, I was proud of never missing a message. I believed efficiency was love, and speed was care. But the one message I ignored, the one from my daughter, was the only one that mattered. It didn't need a reply. It needed a response. Today, I live slower. I listen longer. I stay at the table after dinner and ask how the day really went. I haven't missed a single email since, especially the ones written from the heart.